Welcome to the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, a series of educational podcasts that showcase the connection between human capabilities and good work design, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia. Hi everyone, welcome back to the HFE Hub. I'm Sharon Todd, and today I'm chatting with three professionals from the International Ergonomics Association about a new publication called Giving Your Business the Human Factors Edge and Making It Happen. So today I'm chatting with David Caple, Karen Lange-Morales, and Andrew Imada. It's so great to have all three of you on the HFE Hub today. Thank you for joining me. Karen, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, my name is Karen Lange-Morales. I am from a very small country in Latin America called Guatemala. And I have lived in several countries, including Mexico, Germany, and mostly in Colombia. I studied industrial design, then a master in human development and health promotion, and finally a PhD in public health. I am associate professor at Universidad Nacional de Colombia, and I lead a 25-year-old company in ergonomics and design. We have been working on improving working conditions in several sectors, including the flower industry, oil industry, banking, and several manufacturing companies. During all these years, we have changed the way of applying ergonomics and doing design from a more expert-legal relationship to a more partners or participatory approach. I have served also in two committees at the International Ergonomics Association and at the Colombian Society of Ergonomics.
David, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so for the audience from HFESA, they know me. I'm a past president of HFESA and also, like Andy, a past president of the International Ergonomics Association. My career started after a degree in psychology at Monash University and then a master's in ergonomics from Loughborough University in the UK and various work commitments in Sweden and America. And I came back to Australia when RSI, or repetition strain injury, became a big issue. And I was involved in the first legal case involving employer liability in this area in the taxation office, and continued to work in that area, including visiting the US investigation they were conducting on this same matter. So that was probably my main area in the early days. But over 40 years of running a consulting company, there have been many chapters, many industries over that time, meat processing, mining, offshore oil and gas, manufacturing, banking, like Karen. But more recently, a lot of my projects have been at industry level and company level, looking at emerging issues. And of more recent times, it's been to do with mental health in the workplace and occupational violence and aggression, which nowadays we're talking about psychosocial risk factors. So we're looking at those at the moment with police, with people in healthcare sectors, and more broadly in the community. So I always say our work's a privilege because we learn about what's emerging in our workplaces.
Thank you, David. And Andy, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Andy Imada, and like David, I got a degree in psychology and started off at a university, like many of us, and decided to leave a tenured faculty position because it was so much fun on the outside. And I've been doing consulting for the past, on my own for the past 25 years. And it's been a great joy. And I've had a lot of fun, and like David, worked with a lot of people. I am a macroergonomics consultant, maybe one of the only people who files that on his tax forms, but be that as it may. And I work with people and organizations to help them change their cultures, to adapt to new technologies, to help with scalability issues and generational change. And it's been a great joy. And the ergonomics has been a great tool to help me accomplish all those things. And like David, a variety of clients, and it's been a good time. So And I get to meet good people in this business like Karen, David, and yourself. So.
Thank you. Well, today we have a wealth of knowledge, so it would be great to probably chat about the International Ergonomics Association and maybe tell us about its focus and what it does.
Well, I can just give you a bit of background about the IEA, which has been going for over 60 years. And it's if you like, it's a society of societies. It originally started in Europe and then quickly involved the US. And it organised a triennial congress, and it brought together researchers from around the world to share what they were studying in this broader domain. But over the years, it has grown to not having individual members, but the societies are the members. So if you belong to a Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, you already are a member of the IEA through your society. So there are many thousands of people around the world who are IEA members, and the focus of the IEA is primarily to do a number of things. One of them is to share between societies issues that they may have in common, strategies, professional development programs, and if you like, to work internally in how we can support each other and share research and activities. The second area is looking outwards and looking at working in collaboration with other professional bodies around the world. And in particular, the IEA is accredited with the International Labour Organization, the World Health Organization, International Standards Association, and many others. And so they do collaborative projects together. So one, for example, Andy's going to talk a little bit about some of the projects, but there's one that ILO and WHO and IEA have done on telework, and there's been others on healthcare. And so these collaborative projects are good. And the third area, I suppose, is to reinforce the importance of the profession, the importance of maintaining education programs that enable the future of our domain to be successful, and to look at ways of promoting what we do through the research. So we have many technical committees that bring together researchers and practitioners in particular aspects of human factors and ergonomics to share at a more detailed level, and many of those have their own conferences around the world. And as Andy said, he's particularly part of the organisational design and management with macroergonomics, but there are many other areas. So it's a dynamic organisation that brings together our profession at an international level.
So maybe you could tell us about some of the projects that IEA has been involved with over the years.
Let me take one, Sharon. There are probably four main deliverables that the IEA produces. The most obvious one is the Triennial Congress, with the last was held in 2024 in Jeju in Korea. And for those of us who are interested, the next one is in London in 2027. And if you attend, there will be more ergonomists per square meter than you have ever seen in your life. It is the largest meeting of ergonomists, and it is fun to be with the excitement and the energy that researchers and practitioners bring. So the most obvious one is the Triennial Congress. The second thing that the IEA does was to endorse events so that people know what are legitimate ergonomic meetings or webinars and so on. Just as an example, HIPISA Congress coming up on December 1st and 3rd, if I can make a plug for that. It's happening this year, and it is an endorsed meeting. But it's the member societies that are legitimate organizations, ergonomic organization societies, get to publicize, and IEA endorses those meetings. The third is to put on webinars. And the topics of the day, and most recently, it was just last week, I believe, there was a webinar on resiliency engineering and AI. And I thought that was very timely. And those are the topics of the day that we can respond between the 3-year intervals to help people keep in touch and keep the profession current. And the main body of work is the actual publications. And you can download most of these just by going to iea.cc. This publication we'll be talking about today is part of a series about trying to get ergonomics into industry. And Karen will talk about that in a second, about what this is part of. But there is the document produced by the group in the UK, and then this document. But there is also the ergonomic checkpoints, which has a long history, and it has a second edition, which is easy to use, step-by-step ways of implementing ergonomics, especially in small and medium-sized organizations. There was also the principles and guidelines of HFE in designing and management of work systems that the IEA has produced. And we have ergonomic checkpoints for different industries, including agriculture, healthcare work, and the ergonomic checkpoints in general. And the thing that David mentioned about telework, there is a WHO, ILO, IEA publication on telework that's very important for the day. And finally, the project that Karen was involved in, there's the EQUID document that the IEA published, and we're proud to produce that as guidelines for producing quality in products. So those are the 4 main deliverables: the annual meeting, endorsed meetings, the webinars, and the publications. So those are some things that IEA does for the profession.
And most of those publications are available on the website, as I understand. And you've also got a YouTube channel, haven't you?
I believe so. I'm not that familiar with it, but I think we do.
I understand that you have recently, at the end of 2024, I think, developed a new publication, which is called Making It Happen. That sounds rather exciting. So maybe you could tell us about the publication and its background.
Well, as you heard from David and from Andy, the IEA is interested in spreading the information and application of human factors in ergonomics to the widest audience possible. But they realize that interests and tones are different significantly among communities. Therefore, they decided to create different publications intended to different audiences. The first document was focused on strategic business leaders, so they called C-suite, and was titled Giving Your Business the Human Factors Edge. In that publication, the emphasis was on a greater understanding of workers and their work, increased sales, decrease staff absenteeism, decrease insurance costs, increase efficiency, increase productivity, decrease order lead time, etc. In other words, relevant topics for the ones that are leading the companies. The current publication, that is the theme in this meeting, is a follow-up of that document named Giving Your Business the Human Factors Edge, and it's not focused on why it is important to apply human factors in ergonomics, but on how it can be implemented. The aim was to introduce middle managers to everyday techniques and practices of human factors in ergonomics, and how to develop or introduce ergonomics in the organization. That is why we title it Giving Your Business the Human Factors Edge, Making It Happen. For doing this, the Science, Technology and Practice Standing Committee of the IEA established a steering committee with different backgrounds and great experience in ergonomics interventions. As you could see in our initial presentations, we come from different continents and professions, but share a wide field experience. But in this process, many other ergonomists around the world gave their feedback and contributions, including also the feedback of people that do not work in ergonomics, to ensure that we had the expected tone. According to this, in this publication, we had 3 goals: to spread the knowledge about human factors and ergonomics to middle managers, to motivate middle managers to include human factors and ergonomics in their processes, And third, to give basic hints to establish a human factors and ergonomics program in their companies.
So this publication is predominantly for businesses. So how do you envisage that it will be used?
Well, let me take that, Sharon. The first publication, if you think back on any change that organizations went through, we worked through the quality programs. Right now, we're talking about technology, how we need, companies several years ago said, we need a website. We need to have these different things, but it's no different. Someone somewhere sells an idea that says, this is what it is, and this is why you should do it. As Karen said, this is what that first publication speaks to. We have to convince the leadership that this is the direction that you're going to. So like in the quality programs, it was a matter of survival back then when things became very competitive and products gained in quality. And if you weren't in the game, you weren't in business very long. So the executive said, right, we need to do quality. TQM or whatever you want to call it, we're going to do it. That edict came down and they said, do it. Question is, how do you do it? And this is what this publication is intended to do, is to say, great, you have been given a marching order to say, do ergonomics, bring it into your organization. How do you do it? As Karen said, this is the first one asks, what is it and why? This says, how exactly do you do it? And we get into some of the nuts and bolts of about questions that you need to ask, kind of prerequisites that you have to have. And I think importantly for managers, case studies so people can understand that they are not alone, that their problem is not unique, that your disease is not incurable, that there are others and there's a name for whatever ails you and there is a solution. And I think that's the goal of this thing. This document is to bring it down to a level where people have case studies, questions, suggestions, resources that they can look for to implement these ergonomics. Even questions like, how do you find an ergonomist? People think that we are people who work in soils. And it says, no, we're not ergonomists. We're ergonomists. And it is not a misspelling of economics. We are actually a different profession. And these are the kinds of things like international standards that I think are very helpful for managers to really bring this into the business at a very business level to help them make this change.
One of the differences with this publication is it's got some really nice mind maps in it. I wondered if you could tell us about the maps and their purposes.
Sure, let me take that question. Well, developing a publication for a non-human factors and ergonomic audience requires a combination of academic and professional expertise. Unlike a scientific or academic publication, the emphasis was not on the rigor and accuracy of the information, although of course it is rigorous and accurate, but on the clarity and simplicity of what is conveyed. To achieve this, the use of mind maps was one of the strategies we decided on to capture the reader and improve content recall. Mind maps are widely used in many fields to reflect, synthesize, and present information. As a designer, I have been working with mind maps for many years, and I have used them not only in academia, but also in many of my professional interventions. When I saw how useful they were for people to understand different concepts clearly and quickly, I proposed their use to my colleagues. In fact, the whole process of conceiving this publication was done using mind maps. By presenting information simultaneously, mind maps allow people to visualize multiple dimensions, layers, and relationships that are not possible in a text at a glance. In addition, being images, they retain attention and allow for synthesis of content. This is why we thought that using mind maps in this publication could be extremely useful. Middle managers do not have time or a lot of time to read long texts, and we thought that the inclusion of mind maps would help to catch their attention, motivate them to read more, and remember the key concepts we were introducing. As you saw, the whole publication is full of maps. At some points, the maps introduce the topic, and at others, they synthesize information that has already been presented as text. In this way, we increase the recall of the content. In addition, it makes it easier for the reader to return to a certain topic by visually locating it, and the maps can even be used to explain the content to others.
So what are the stages in implementing the HFE program?
Let me have a go at that. And I must just do a segue to what Karen was saying, because Andy and I talk a lot, and Karen is in Colombia, Andy's in California, I'm in Australia, and we meet online like we are in this podcast. And we would talk a lot, and at the end of it, Karen would email back to Andy and I these wonderful pictorials of what we had said. And it was so useful for us to use her mind maps to actually get our thoughts in order and to structure the document in a way. And she's quite right. You look at the mind maps first and you try and understand what the chapter is about. And then you're tempted to go through and read it a bit further. So Andy and I are very grateful for Karen's skills in developing the mind maps. And I think it's a great addition. And I think as ergonomists, we should look at using these tools because they avoid the need to look at a blank page of text. So in terms of the stages of the publication of the introducing the program, we actually looked at when does an ergonomist get involved in an issue in a workplace, and there tended to be three basic areas. One of them was there's a lot of injuries happening in a particular department or a particular team, and so it's a particular project that you get engaged to work with that team and understand why now is this becoming an issue and what can we do to address that. The second area is in the planning type stage where you may be engaged because we're going to introduce some new software, we're going to introduce a new process to the organisation, new technology, and we want to work with the designers, we want to work with the procurement people to make sure we get the most appropriate outcome for that organisation. And then the other is when you tend to become embedded in an organisation as part of the subject matter expert role, but work in developing a new management system that integrates human factors and ergonomics as part of the broader ongoing agenda. So you have a longer term relationship with the organisation. And each one of these, there tend to be four stages. The first stage is to ensure that the senior leadership of the team and those, if you like, influencers in the organisation, like the trade unions, the health and safety representatives, the committees, are actually understanding what it is that you're doing and why you are there and what they hope to get out of your involvement. And so there's an educative piece, there's a establishment of credibility. And then the second stage is to actually start the program and making sure you've got the right resources in place, that if there's going to be field work conducted, that the people who are going to be in the assessment with ergonomic assessment methods understand what to do, why you're there. There needs to be a commitment of the costs of that and taking them offline and involving them in focus groups and the other engagement part of it. And then the third stage is actually doing it and doing those focus groups, connecting your data, in observing what's going on different shifts, for example, if it's a 24/7 operation. And then the final stage is to bring it together and work with them in developing an action plan with your recommendations and ensuring that you have some methods which are consistent with the legislation. And I know in Australia the risk management model is the basis of the legislative compliance. And so you need to show that your control strategies are compliant with the hierarchy of control, but also that you have a way of monitoring and measuring that the outcomes are achieved. So this methodology is consistent with the legal process, but this publication shows you what to do in the stages of getting there.
I have to say that the mind maps are great, to be honest. I really found this really enlightening when I went through the document, and I loved the detail that's in them. And you're right, it does reinforce all the things that you need to remember, and it certainly assists with the stages of the program. So well done, I think it's amazing. What are the skills that we need and the conditions that we have to consider to implement an HFE program?
Let me take that. I think this is one of the main emphasis for our publication, and to draw the three of us together. We work in very similar ways, and I think most of us in this business know how complicated it is to try and get people and the environment to change. Let me start with perhaps an analogy. Let's say that you have to have brain surgery. The first thing you have to assume is that the surgeon knows what he or she is doing. So we look into their qualifications and their skills. Where were they educated? How many surgeries they do? What's their success rates, and so on. We look at the technical aspects of that. And in the first meeting, you have to have the confidence that this person can effectively do the job. You are judging them by the basis of how well they plan the surgery, how well they can organize the team, and so on. These are technical skills that are a necessary condition to be a successful brain surgeon. Fortunately for the brain surgeon, while they're making the change, the patient doesn't respond. The patient doesn't fight back. And I think this is a very big difference in the work that we as ergonomists do. We are working with people, technology, and systems that are live, that are active, that have cultures of their own, and that react and become, the solution becomes part of the system, and it responds in real time to what the changes that we are making, if not resisting to the changes that we are making. And so one of the things we focus on here are the kinds of additional skills besides the technical skills. So the technical skills that we have are, can you assess and analyze the work situation? You know, what is the problem? And we have the science and the technology to accomplish that. Secondly, can you come up with a design that solves the problem that you've identified? And thirdly, can you prove that produce results that say, yes, in fact, this problem is solved? So the assessment, the design, and analysis are necessary conditions for us to do. In addition, we have to be able to plan, we have to be able to organize, lead, and control that whole process within an organizational context. But those are brain surgeon kind of qualities, right? They're absolutely necessary. I think what makes it unique for us is that we have found that in the work that all three of us have done, that you really need to develop the trust of the people that you're working with. The management has to have your trust that you can deliver the results that you were paid to do. And the people that you are trying to change need to trust you. And I think the two critical soft skills that we talk about in one of the chapters is developing a respect with the organization, that the people that you are listening to, talking to, we do not talk at them at 15-minute intervals and give them grades and exams. They are an active part of the process. They are an active part of the solution that we need to come up with. As they talk about these problems, we have to have great empathy for what they're enduring. So when a manager tells you that the company is at risk, when they tell you that their job is at risk, it requires a great deal of empathy to understand, as David often says, ask people, what keeps you up at night? And I think that question is really, really important because it says, I understand your problem. I'm here to help you solve the problem. And I think that's really important. And I think that respect and that empathy help us to develop a trust relationship with the organization, with the managers whose departments and units we will affect and whose jobs we will affect, and the people whose safety depend on real solutions. So if we say this is a new way of doing things, the first reaction of most human beings is, why? Why do we have to do that? And these are the kinds of, I think, skill areas that we emphasize in this document that say it is more than just being a good brain surgeon and being able to work in a hospital, but to gain the trust of the people in real time, in real systems. And I think there are some necessary conditions that we talk about that are, in our experience, extremely valuable. One is this sense of psychological safety, that people have to feel that they can speak up, that they can say from the worker's perspective what the problem is, that there is not some area that we cannot speak about because that's someone's pet project, or that's the color that they want, and that's the way it is. They have to be, there's a freedom to say what they want without retribution and to engage in an open discussion. And there also have to be real resources. We cannot expect to produce quality without the necessary time, necessary budgets, realistic deliverables. These are all requirements that we would make of any other intervention, whether it be quality or technology, whatever the organizational change. There have to be resources that are commensurate with the kind of change that you're looking at. And so we focus on those things besides the technical skills that we as ergonomists have, that we have to think about it as a system change. And what are the requirements to make this system change and help people to change? So I think this is an important area that we really focus on for ergonomists, to look beyond technical skills and to look at the human skills that I think make us such a unique profession of improving system effectiveness and helping people enjoy better well-being and safety and health. So I think that's one of the major differences with this publication and some others.
I think it's great that you focused on these human skills. I recently spoke with Sidney Decker, and in his discussions, he was talking about these very things, empathy and respect. And then the one that he added in was forgiveness for when things have gone wrong, which was an entirely different way of thinking. And the mind map here is brilliant. Needed skills, technical skills, human skills, and then we can see obviously the things we'd expect: planning, organising, leading and controlling. And then, of course, the human skills that you've mentioned, which is, respect and empathy. It also reminds me of a phrase that I've heard someone use, which is, I think it was Anjem Nawid, actually, who had said, tread softly because you tread on my dreams. So rather than walking in and stomping over somebody's work, is to respect and have the empathy for the work that's already been done and see what that is before you make change.
Well done. Well done. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me, does the project need to reflect international HFE standards, sorry?
Yes, actually, Karen and Andy and I worked with our colleagues, mainly from Japan, just looking at where we are talking about these human-centered systems in the standards level. Ergonomics is represented on many international standards committees, but in this particular area, ISO 159 is the main area where we're on various subcommittees. But there's one series called 27500, which is the Human-Centered Organisation Standard. And it does embed the requirement to look at the issues that we're talking about in this publication. So if there are listeners to the podcast who are interested to see what standards to align with, if they would like to do that, have a look at the 27500 series. And in there are various clauses that talk about capitalising on individual differences, looking at standards for developing products and usability, looking at adopting a total systems approach. They're all in different parts of these standards. And I'm sure there are some companies that are, I suppose, more familiar with the occupational health and safety standards, of which there are audit tools and things around to do that. But I think we need to look well beyond that in this area and look at ISO 159 and maybe see how we can get some profile of that within the human factors and ergonomics community more broadly.
This publication was done really with love. I mean, we really put our expertise, our knowledge, but it was really a pleasure doing it. And with passion, let's say that. So we really wanted to try to put our experience there, our good memories in doing things there, the things that worked or are working when we are assessing or when we are working with the companies.
I was just going to add, as Andy said, this is the second publication in this series. The first one was for the C-suite leaders. This is for line managers. The IEA is looking at developing a third publication targeted towards trade unions and workers, which will just help to develop this as a suite of documents.
If you're interested in some of the publications that have been mentioned in the podcast today, go to the International Ergonomics Association website or have a look at the podcast information on your podcast app. Thanks for joining us at the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia, where human-centred design really matters. If you like this podcast, make us your favourite in your podcast app. We look forward to chatting with you next time.